Welcome to another edition of Small Time Nooks, where we explore stories about interesting people and fascinating events from the Big Bang to the 21st century. Chaos theory is commonly explained with the example of a butterfly's wing flap in Brazil starting a ripple effect which will eventually cause a tornado to form in Texas. Following the apocryphal advice of film producer Samuel Goldwyn, we want a story that starts out with an earthquake and works its way up to a climax. This episode of Small Time Nooks replaces the Brazilian butterfly with a destructive Indonesian volcanic eruption, and instead of a Texan tornado, what follows is a summer of climate disruption which has a devastating effect on many parts of the globe and the creation of a literary phenomenon which endures to the present day. The Lost Summer of 1816. During the early 1800s, parts of the globe are experiencing the cool end of what geologists refer to as the Little Ice Age. In less than 10 years, there are a series of 6 earthquakes in equatorial regions. A seventh one changes everything. In 1815, the Dutch East Indies Company runs international trade in the region, which includes Sumbawa Island in modern-day Indonesia. Daily life of the island's Tambora culture is still very much rooted in tradition. They live in raised bamboo and thatched homes, fish the shores, and till the extremely fertile land. Their oral tradition has served them well for generations. On the 5th of April 1815, the habitually benign Mount Tambora interrupts their sun-soaked life with a small eruption. This causes confusion and some worry, but people carry on with their activities. The second event, 5 days afterwards, is when Mount Tambora reveals its true power. The force of this eruption creates deadly lava flows and incinerating whirlwinds, both of massive speeds, which decimate the surrounding villages and populations. Toxic gases and ash are pumped into the atmosphere for days. Mount Tambora's second volcanic explosion is 1,000 times greater than the eruption seen in Iceland in 2010. 200 miles away, crew find themselves brushing inexplicable piles of ash from the decks of their ships. A staggering 70 to 100,000 deaths occur on Sumbawa and nearby islands, but the sulfate-infused tephra, rock fragments and particles ejected by volcanoes, has reached the stratosphere and begins its airborne journey across the rest of the globe. Europe, spring 1816. Between 1793 and 1815, Europe sees a generation of revolutionary wars ending with the Battle of Waterloo. Armies demob, causing high unemployment. The reshaping of international trade routes is slowly stabilizing the fragmented food supply chain. Politicians see a change in citizens who have been intrigued by France's revolutionary ideals. Spring remains cold and wet, and everyone is looking forward to the warm summer months. Unbeknownst to them, the sulfate has already reached their stratosphere and is preventing much of the sunlight from getting through to the Earth's crust. The promised warmth fails to arrive, and the rains seem heavier than usual. Ireland and Great Britain bear the brunt of the poor conditions. Ireland is dependent on wheat, oat, and potato harvests as their staple diets and exports. The failure of these crops trigger a famine, not to be confused with the potato blight-induced famine of the 1840s. Many European countries undergo similar fates. As the volcanic particles disperse, countries experience different degrees of effects. Hungary and Italy receive oddly discolored falls of snow. Many of Europe's major rivers flood, which further disrupts supply chains, and an unseasonable frost is widespread in August. In Germany, population decreases more by emigration than fatalities. Switzerland sees a famine in the densely populated and more industrialized east of the country. But Scandinavia, the northern Baltic regions, Eastern Europe, and Western Russia are hardly affected. Russian Emperor Alexander I is able to provide grain to aid the affected countries. Despite this help, food prices still shoot up, and bewildered, angry citizens from all over the continent demonstrate in front of grain markets and bakeries. Many demonstrations turn into riots. This is the most violent example of civil unrest in Europe since the French Revolution. Tambora's global reach. North America is also a victim of the volcanic winter and faces an initial and persistent dry fog which dims the sunlight. They also suffer low temperatures, food shortages, rising prices, and similar bizarre weather events seen in Europe. The situation on the eastern seaboard is made worse by its evolving and still inadequate transportation infrastructure. In other parts of the world, Brazil and West Africa are hit with unexpected droughts, while China and India have surging floods in their monsoon seasons and see summer snowfalls. Tambora's eruption is widely covered in the media, but the state of science is not developed enough to make the connection between the volcanic activity and the subsequent disruption of weather conditions around the world. After effects. The famines that occur in Europe produce several major typhus epidemics. In Ireland, 65,000 people die of the disease in the years after 1816. A Belfast doctor blames the typhus outbreak on a combination of a large amount of demobbed soldiers, bad harvests, malnutrition, and the disease spreading through packed soup kitchens. Italy, Switzerland, and Scotland suffer similar outbreaks, and a further estimated 100,000 people lose their lives as a result. A new and deadly cholera strain emerges in Bengal, India, which almost wipes out the British Army. This epidemic spreads to Moscow, and by 1832 it has reached London and New York. Other observers have made the supposition that the poor conditions in the 1816 eastern United States has an influence on the decision by many families to pack up and join the first wave of homesteaders who had already headed out west. Switzerland sees a freezing of a glacier which forms a temporary lake. It eventually thaws and collapses in 1818, killing dozens of people. China's Yunnan famine helps to reverse the fortunes of the ruling Qing dynasty. Cultural effects. A study researching volcanic era paintings between 1500 and 1900 notes that more red pigment was used in the paintings of these sunsets and sunrises than those worked on at other times. A specific cultural effect grew organically from an 1816 holiday in Switzerland, where the incessant storms and heavy rainfall of that summer has forced a small group of poets and writers to abandon their sailing plans on Lake Geneva. Among them, the emerging radical poet Shelley noted the fields of crops were badly flooded. Stuck inside, they drink laudanum, liquid opium, watch spectacular thunderstorms, and the group read aloud German ghost stories. One night, the most famous name of the group, Lord Byron, challenges the rest of his friends to a ghostwriting contest. This challenge prompted the youngest among them, Mary Godwin, later Mary Shelley, to write a story which she would eventually redraft as Frankenstein, the modern Prometheus. The Tambora Culture. While the rest of the world eventually recovers from the effects of the eruption, none suffered more than the Tambora culture itself. The population of the island had been halved by the tragedy. In its wake, village authority and the oral tradition had disintegrated. Once the geographical trauma begins to settle, the Sultan of Sumbawa Islands installs a program of immigration from the surrounding islands. New faces flood in to fill the population vacuum. They bring a combination of their own cultures, and a fresh community evolves in reaction. While some folk traditions still hark back to the eruption, they cannot reach far back enough into the past, and the Tambora culture is tragically lost to history. Thanks for listening to Small Time Nooks. Please check out our other episodes.